Some localities we have really first-class circuit court clerks, which, by the way, is an elected position, which is a good deal, I think, for the citizen. I think in many ways a lot of our lives are ruined by unelected bureaucrats that come in and with fiats take away our rights and everything else. We just saw that happen with the community colleges, where the board there, just by fiat, told Blue Ridge Community College they have to ban faculty, staff, and students from carrying guns. And I didn't elect those people, and yet they're dictating rights, what we can and can't do. We've had circuit court clerks that, I don't know if they don't read the law or if they're intentionally trying to violate it. It seems like every couple weeks we've got something popping up. Somebody is requiring photographs to be taken of people, or they're taking more than 45 days without issuing a temporary permit, or one thing or another. Sometimes I just bang my head against the wall, wondering where they came up with this stuff. And we have gone back to the General Assembly and clarified and clarified and clarified. Some of that was judges, too, to be fair. We've had judges that just refuse to read the law. And so we go back again the next year and say, we need to clarify this yet again, because we got a judge that can't seem to get beyond 10th grade when it comes to reading English. So, and we're finally we've gotten it home pretty well. But the circuit court clerks are important people. They have a critical job in getting permits done, as well as doing a whole bunch of other stuff to keep the legal system moving through. And tonight we have a guest. Mr. Frey is from Fairfax, and he's here tonight to talk, basically to talk about the procedures in Fairfax, what you do here to get a permit, and answer some questions, I would assume, that you have about the permitting process. I know I have a couple of questions that a member that couldn't make it but desperately wanted to tonight sent me to see if I would be kind enough to ask, so I've picked a couple of a few that he had. So, Mr. Frey, and it's been, how long have we figured, what, 6 years?
5 or 6 years, I think.
Since you were here last time. Mr. Frey came out before and we had a chat with the group, so moving forward to you, sir.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I am John Frey. I'm your circuit court clerk. I've been the clerk here in Fairfax since 1992. So going on, finishing up 20 years here. And so I was here when this, and forgive me, I understand there's a problem, concealed handgun permit, concealed weapon permit, and I understand that, but it started out as the concealed weapon permit. If you go to the Virginia Annotated Code, it's still indexed under concealed weapon permit. So if I slip and say concealed weapon permit, it's because I've been there since the beginning. But I understand it's a concealed handgun permit, and that there's other kinds of weapons that aren't covered by this.
Well, if you slip, I'll just go to the General Assembly, which we're going to do anyhow, and say, we just need to make it a concealed weapon permit. It would be so much easier on John Frey.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. And let me just give you a little history, and then we'll go in. And really, I didn't have a speech tonight per se. I really wanted more of a dialogue. Last time I came, we had a good dialogue, a bunch of questions and answers. And I will tell you, we won't agree on everything tonight. But I think on most things we are going to agree. And my office has tried to make this as streamlined as possible. But I think some of the animosity is still from back in 1995. When this first was enacted, the county attorney's office made some additional requirements over and above what the Supreme Court, what the statute said. And the Supreme Court is given the task of creating the form and so forth. But one of the things that Fairfax County did was on mental health. Okay? They interpreted that if you'd ever had marriage counseling. Okay? And so they were going to reject people because of marriage counseling. And that's just wrong. I mean, the idea is that that's what responsible people do. My wife and I have been married 29 years. We have gone to marriage counseling 15 years ago or so. Didn't take long, but that's not wrong. That's what responsible people do, is to go, it's not mental health, it's marriage counseling. It is not going to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist for this. So the county really overstepped its boundaries. And this group and some others rightfully got mad. And they started calling the courthouse. Well, my office is in control of the county attorney's office. I mean, that's separate. That's under the Board of Supervisors. And so many of you know Richard Gardner. Richard's a friend of mine. He actually sued me, and we'll talk about that case tonight too. But that's okay. I mean, Richard and I know each other. We're good friends.
What are friends for?
Exactly. But I mean, Dennis told me ahead of time. I mean, and as a lawyer, and I can't practice as clerk, but as a lawyer, that's the thing. You do battle during the day, and you go home, and you're still friends. And so Richard said, John, this is the case, this is the issue, and I said, that's fine, and let's go at it, and we'll see what happens. But some of this is out of my control because I've got, and each court is different. Sometimes the judges wanted control, sometimes the clerk control, and the judges didn't want anything to do with it. Our judges wanted to be the people that said yay or nay, okay? If you have my signature on your permit, it's because you moved, or you lost it, or the dog ate it. So I'll sign all the replacement ones, but all the original ones, they'll sign, okay? So, but anyhow, so we had this big problem, and they started flooding the courthouse with phone calls. The switchboards were just jammed with this stuff. So I called Richard up. I said, Richard, please tell these guys that I'm probably the only guy in Fairfax County that's in favor of this law. And within an hour, it had stopped. And so I appreciate, I said, thank you, Richard, and so forth. So anyhow, bottom line is, it's been about 5 or 6 years that this went out here. And one of the issues at that time that was brought up, and that's really was, there were a number of courts that were mailing back the permits, and we were actually saying you had to come back in. So you guys asked me, why can't we have you mail it to us if we want it mailed? Why make you come up to the courthouse? I said, that's reasonable. It's just no one had asked. I went back, and I know the judges would be, worried about this. So I talked to a bunch of clerks that I know that were mailing it back, and then I got the data, and I went to the judges and I said, hey, this isn't a problem here. I'm going to be doing this, and they said, fine, John, go ahead. And I will say that back in '95, he's now retired, long gone, but the chief judge at the time really wasn't in favor of this law, but Bruce Bach was the chief judge, and he gathered all the judges together and said, I don't care what you think about this law, we're here to enforce the law. So if they're entitled to it, they get it. Now, overall, I can tell you that that's pretty much still the standard today. I can tell you also that there's a couple of them, and I'm not going to name them in public here, that does no purpose, but they and their law clerks still have an animosity towards giving these permits out, okay? That being said, what we've tried to do, and my office has done, and I've got them tonight, and you guys really don't need them, okay? You've got your permits, you know how to do it, but we put out on the website the instructions on how to get it through Fairfax. We even have put up there, Carol Snow, some of you know Miss Snow, she deals with this, she's been doing this for years, and we've actually put a frequent errors list together that people overlook. The biggest one we have is that scars, marks, and peculiar characteristics. People just, for some reason, it's real small up there at the top, and they forget it, okay? And so they get rejected, and then you got to have the ordinance hearing. Sometimes on that height and weight, we don't prepare this form, this is a state form, but on the height and weight, they put 5'8", so it says they're 5 foot 8 pounds. Okay, so it's easy to do things like that. And that was I just had a guy in the other day. I've known him forever. He stopped by to see me. I said, "Well, let me see it before you go turn in." 5'8". I said, "So you're 5 feet 8 pounds?" He goes, "What?" I said, "Here, you got to fix it." So we fixed it. Okay, and I said, "You left this blank. The characteristics." I said, "You got to list them or put NA there. Just don't leave it blank." Now, one thing that we have changed, just last week, 2 weeks ago at the judges meeting, Charlie Maxfield is one of the judges. He's probably one of the most supportive of this up there. And he and I were working with the judges. One of the issues that you guys have, I know, is this proof of residency. Okay? We didn't get it repealed, but what they did have agreed to is that to take a driver's license, if your driver's license matches the address on your application, they're going to accept that as proof of residency, okay? And I'll get into why that's jurisdictional and venue and stuff with courts, all right? But bottom line is that changed, and so we have made some changes over time with input from you and other groups and so forth. So I'm very open to that. Last time it was mailing back the permits. Tonight, hopefully, there will be something that comes out of this meeting and we can make some more changes for you. Now, the case that Richard Gardner sued me on, it was Kent versus John Frey, okay? And it went up to the Court of Appeals, and it was based on this residency issue, okay? And the idea is the statute says that, and they put in the courts. They didn't put it in the state police. They didn't put it anywhere else. They didn't do it administratively. They said the courts. So everybody coming into court, you've got two things you got to deal with. You got to deal with jurisdiction, and you have to deal with venue. And now sometimes there's if any of you are lawyers, that's hazy. What is really jurisdiction? What is venue? Sometimes they kind of cross the line and it's a little bit. But circuit court does not have jurisdiction. It has jurisdiction, let me put it that way, over these handgun permits. But the venue where you have to go to is in the circuit court where you reside. Okay? So that's what the Court of Appeals looked at and said it is not unreasonable for the court to ask for proof of you reside because of the way the statute's written. Now let me go back. This is something you may not care about, but 30 years ago, for the women in here, 30 years ago in Virginia, you had to go to get your marriage license where you resided. So if you lived in Fairfax but you worked in Arlington, you couldn't go down to the Arlington courthouse at lunch and get your marriage license. You had to come back to Fairfax because that's where you resided. Now the General Assembly's changed that, okay? There's really no need in this day and age with the background checks and the computers and stuff that they have to say that you've got to go back to the jurisdiction and get it where you reside. And if I were, that would be something if I were you guys to try to look at, and I'm sure you probably have, but this is something the General Assembly could do. There's precedent for it. We used to require the women to go back to where they resided. Now, since we're Virginia's for lovers and you'd come down here from New York, then you could go anywhere in Virginia and get it. But if you were a Virginia resident, you had to get it in the circuit court where you resided. Okay? So this is similar. But that's what the Court of Appeals said, that it was legitimate. It was not an abuse of power for the circuit court in Fairfax to require additional proof of residency. Okay? So that's where we're at. So the only way that's going to get changed, that was not appealed to the Supreme Court of Virginia, so the only way to get that changed is going to be legislatively. Okay? Now, Judge Maxfield and I, there's some arguments that, that weren't brought up in that case that maybe the next case would look at, and one of those things is that, and there's some argument again on jurisdiction and venue and so forth, but on a name change. When you come in for a name change, you don't have to have proof. And the name change statute is similar, that you have to get it where you reside. Okay? So, but the court doesn't ask you to bring additional documentation. So that never got argued. So that may be something that could be argued in another case, is that they still are treating you differently than other litigants. All right? But that's really beyond my control. That's a judge's decision on their decision on, they get to decide if it's jurisdiction or venue. I don't. Okay, I'm the clerk. I'm the neutral third party. All right? So my office is trying to get this for you. I'll hand these out. If you got friends that are trying to get a permit in Fairfax, please tell them they're on our website, but please tell them at least go to the helpful hints. This will save them from having to come in and do an ordinance hearing. That means taking off work, coming into court, and having all the hassle, getting through security, and all those other things, okay? So please, just pass those around, and it's the last page here, but this is on our website, so please tell them to go to the website. You guys already have gone through this. You have your permits, okay? So I'm really not talking to you, but tell your friends that are trying to do this, my office is trying to get you your permit, okay? I'm not against this law, and I think, there's things that could be done. One of it, if they would change the statute and take out that making you have to go back to where you reside to get the permit. In this day and age, there's no need for that. And if you work in Fairfax, you live in Arlington, you ought to be able to go down at lunch and get in Fairfax or get it in Midlothian or wherever you might be. So that's just my personal opinion. Okay? I do have a permit. I don't carry. That's just me. When I did this, I did the course back when it first came up, and I took it from a sheriff's deputy. And the sheriff's deputy in that training said, if you're going to carry, then you have to be willing in your own mind to be willing to kill someone. Because you don't pull your gun out and say, stop, or I'm going to shoot like in the movies, because you're going to be dead. And so that always stuck with me. And I said, I'm willing to defend my family. I'm not sure that I'm out here willing to go and shoot someone else. That's just me. Okay? But I am not against this. But that kind of, the other thing that I know that's come up and roused some of you guys is why do you have to do the extra copies? Okay? You got to understand, we've had budget cuts for the last 5 years. I have the largest circuit court in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I've got 161 people. We have 23,000 new cases. And when land records is booming, we do over 500,000 documents a year in the land records division. I've got probate, I got marriage licenses, you name the gauntlet, we're dealing with it. And so we ask every litigant, every civil case, if you're filing a civil case with us, we are asking you for, actually, we want the original 3 for everyone but the gun permits. Because the 4th copy, the press threatened to sue us because they didn't have immediate access to these civil cases. So what we've done is ask all the other civil litigants, you know, that are business disputes and stuff, give us a 4th copy and we put it in a box for the press to go through. We do not put your stuff in that box for the press to go through, okay? But what I'm asking you, and the self-addressed stamped envelope, the return envelope, those purposes is to speed the process for us, okay? We are just asking you, like we ask every other litigant, to provide the extra copies. Otherwise, my staff has to make the extra copies, and we're understaffed, and we're trying to get them out within the 45 days. The last time I was here, you guys asked me to be able to mail them back to you, and so we've done that. So if you want it, we're mailing them back to you if you want it, and so forth. So that's the reasoning behind asking for the extra copies. It's not to try to make it more difficult for you. We're asking every civil litigant to do that. And that's what we're doing, is just because of the time and it takes for, I mean, we don't even keep track of the number of pages we have, okay? But for example, you guys, the Episcopal Church litigation, that was over 100 bankers' boxes of documents and exhibits that we had to get ready and send it to the Supreme Court on appeal. So that's the kind of massive documentation our office is dealing with, and that's why we ask you to provide those extra copies, okay? And I honestly, I'm not treating you any different than anyone else. We ask every civil litigant to do that, okay? And with that, one other thing, this is the fun part of my job. We are a court of record. And so we have the land records back to 1742. We have land grants for like Coven Mill over in Great Falls. We have some church pew deeds. And you don't think about owning your own church pew, but they used to own in George Washington's time, they would buy and sell church pews. And they often had church pews at several different churches. And we have 2 church pew deeds for the historic Pohick Church down on Route 1 that are signed by both Mason and George Washington on the same documents. And we've been told by the archivists and the folks that have come in and appraised them that those are some of the only documents that they're aware of that have both Mason and Washington's signature on the same document. And we're the custodian of those. We also have George and Martha Washington's original wills. And so I've got here copies tonight, probably enough. If not, you can also go on our website and I can get you more copies. I can send them to Phil or some of the other members. Dennis, I can get them to you for the next meeting. But these are transcripts of George and Martha Washington's wills. They are fascinating. I love George Washington's will. I'm just going to read you a little part. In the name of God, amen. I, George Washington of Mount Vernon, a citizen of the United States, and lately president of the same. As if we wouldn't remember who George Washington was. And lately president of the same. So I'm going to pass these around too. And then these are, like I said, transcripts. We can pass these. I think I got enough for everyone. We can start. But with that, I just want to open it to any questions you have. Yes, sir.
I moved out here from California just over a year ago, so obviously I was very excited about actually being able to get a permit.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I'm in the process of coming out. Read on the internet about, especially like Northern Virginia, that sometimes a little bit problematic. They don't really want to. And I was going to carp just a little bit about the 3 copies.
Will you forgive me now?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Knowing that everyone else is getting stuck with that too makes me feel so much better.
I strive not to do anything, treat you guys any different.
And especially hearing you say that, and now knowing the rationale behind that, I could even say now that I would be in favor of that. Saving some taxpayer money. For you guys doing that. The point that I wanted to make was, after I filled out the application, all that, and I was working very carefully to make sure I got everything needed, I took it in, and the young lady who had taken my application, I asked her, because I knew that in this area they have a history of taking over the 45 days law. And I asked her, I said, well, what do I do if this winds up taking over 45 days? And she said something like, oh, you know, I wouldn't worry about it. They usually get it out within, and I think she said 50 to 55 days, something like that.
In Fairfax, that's just not, we're not going that way.
Right, well, and I don't know if she might have been new or maybe it was a busy time or whatever, and I said, well, you know, with all due respect, the law allows you 45 days, so, you know, if that comes to pass, and so, and not to, you know, poke at it, I mean, it kind of, you know, the impression I got from her was that, well, you know, not really that big of a deal, just, you know, just waiting it would come. And it did come on the 45th day. I don't know if that was, you know,
That's not on purpose, that's not on purpose, no.
So basically my question was, I wanted to ask you about that, about the length of time, because I know that there's other counties, probably much smaller counties, but people say they get their permits in a week.
Well, we're doing over like 300 a month now, which is quite a bit for these. But the real thing, I'm not trying to blame the police department, but they've got one guy that does the background checks. But Carol Snow gets it in. One of the other reasons for the extra copies is because one's in the file, one's going over to the police, and one's going to go down to the state police. So they send it over to the Fairfax County Police Department to do background check, and that can take, it's just one guy who's doing all their background checks. And so usually it takes, so that's really, if we didn't have the background check, we would have those out within 2 weeks probably. So most of that time, and I'm not trying to lay it off on the police department, but most of that time is taken with the background check. And it will come back, and what happens is when you get the background check, it will come back and it'll say it's verified and there's no problems. And so then the judges will just sign it. Carol Snow's got to prepare the permit to send it up for their signature, but we sign off no problems.
If the constitutional carry would fix that whole background check.
Right. Well, that's true. That's right. Absolutely. If there is a problem, you have, you can always have, if we reject it, you have an ordinance hearing. And so you come in and show why you should be given that. Okay? But sometimes the police can't really verify some common names. There's something there they can't verify the person, and they're going to say, you can't verify this. Or it shows that they had some kind of, you know, they have a record of some kind that may make them not eligible for the permit. And so they'll say, they'll bring it to the judge's attention, and then the judge is going to say denied and bring them in for the ordinance hearing. Right? But my staff, you know, the people up front, they're not doing it on a daily basis. They're taking all that paperwork in. So I apologize for that. If you have a problem, okay, if there's any issues and you want a real question, the lady to call, you can call me too, but the lady to call is Carol Snow. Okay? She's been doing my permits for years now. And actually, it's been a little while, but she's proud that she's on the internet and everyone says nice things about her, that she's really helpful and so forth. But Carol would have told you that, to my knowledge, we had some problems when we first had these budget cuts. But to my knowledge, we haven't had the issue. It may cut it close, but we haven't had the issue that. But if it did that, we would do what we're required to do, and that's give you a certified true copy. And I thought we were going to get, I really thought a couple of years ago, we were really, the budgets coming from the Kane administration on, they were talking about 15% cuts in the circuit court clerk's office at one time. If they had done that, my idea was I was just going to issue you one when you came in. We were going to certify and just give it to you, because waiting 45 days and tracking it and then mailing it out, that would have taken more resources than it was worth. I would say, look, guys, I'm telling you up front, we can't do it in 45 days, so here's your permit. After 45 days, it's going to be valid. Okay? But we never got to that. Fortunately, we didn't have the big budget cuts. We still had budget cuts, but they were in the 1 and 3 range, and you have some cuts, but you can live with that. Okay? Dennis.
What's your role, if any, in the whole ethics system? I understand that judges who get an ethics complaint, that information is kept from the average citizen of Virginia. And the reason that's important is because we don't have direct election of judges. We don't have the Missouri plan. Right. But because we don't have the direct election of judges, our judges, just like South Carolina, are the only two states where they are elected by the legislature. Correct. So I, if a citizen, were to go down and speak on the re-election of a judge, and some judge has some ethics situation, I'm not allowed to know about that? What's the thinking behind that?
You need to ask your General Assembly member. Okay, so I'm not the expert on that. But what it is, and it's kind of funny, it's called the Jerk Commission. It's a Judicial Inquiry and Review Commission, and its nickname is the Jerk Commission.
what?
Okay, so take that for what it's worth, but everyone calls it the Jerk Commission. And it is in secret, okay? And I had an issue with one of my judges, I'm not gonna go into it, what it was, and it was the second time we'd had this issue, and I actually called the Jerk Commission on this judge and asked them to investigate him. They wouldn't even tell me. I didn't find out if they met with him. I don't know if they censured him or reprimanded him or orally reprimanded him, nothing. So even I don't get access to that, and that's even with one of the judges that I had reported on something.
It's almost like they're treating it like an employment situation where,
Right.
you know, when you complain about a police officer, you don't really know if there was punishment.
Right.
It's an employment sort of thing. It almost sounds like what they're doing with it, but this is not, I mean, that's an important office, critical office to have somebody in there that's not 100% upboard because of the power they have is incredible.
Right. Well, what Philip said, you know, and not just because I'm the clerk here, I think it's important to have the clerk elected. There's been some move over the years to get the clerk unelected, but, you know, if you come over to the courthouse, the General District Court, which is appointed by the judges, the clerk's appointed by the judges, they close their counters at 3 and shut off their phones. You know, you're not going to get that from an elected clerk. Okay? You have things like this, you know, there's things where I've gone to judges and said this is right and we're going to change this. And with the budget stuff, you know, I'm looking at the forest. I've got land records, public services, civil intake, criminal, things like that. They're just looking at their law clerk and their court clerk. And, you know, so if those decisions were made, it wouldn't be in the whole view. So I do agree with Bill, they should be. Yes, Ed.
Speaking of elections, I heard you might be running for another one.
I was not going to talk about that tonight, but that is true. When Ken announced for governor, I announced that I was running for attorney general. But when I had asked to come here to speak tonight, that wasn't even in the cards. He hadn't made any announcement, so I didn't want to bring that up tonight. Because that's our, you know, I came here to talk about the concealed handgun permits.
You can certainly come back and talk about that.
I would love to do that. Yes, sir.
I was just going to give you feedback. I had great experience getting my permit with your office, so I want to say thank you. But I had a question on if you move, is there a requirement to get a new permit with your new address, or is there a time?
You want to get you want that matched up with your driver's license, okay? And so you go back to the court where you got your original. So if you moved to Loudon, you'd come back to us. It is the weirdest thing for me to be signing permits for somebody that's now living in Loudon, but that's what they decided to do. And in a way it makes sense because we have all the original paperwork. We said that you were fine, and then you don't have to go through a whole nother review by that court. Yes, sir.
So what you're really saying that this is more like a county system than it is a state or national?
In a lot of ways, it is jurisdictional. I mean, that's the way the circuit courts are. I mean, you have general things, but I mean, I've got 15 circuit court judges, and